Dr. Bukowski will be first up, but before he speaks, I want to share with you an anecdote he told us backstage in the green room. We were talking about social networking, and Bill told us that his mother was one of the first people to send him a friend request on Facebook. He declined. Interestingly, the title of his talk today is A Digital World for Friendship, Considerations Inside and Out, Ancient and Very Modern. Please join me in welcoming Bill Bukowski.
Well, I should explain that the reason I turned my mother down was not because I didn't want to have contact with her, just the opposite, but because I'd already enjoyed over 50 years of communication with her, either directly or via more traditional techniques like the telephone. I didn't know why we should something wasn't broke, why fix it? Since then, of course, I haven't been able to accept any offers to be a friend on anybody's site because I'd have to explain to them that somehow my relationship with them is different than my mother's. So anyways, the topic that I want to talk about today is something old, something that existed before any of us existed and will presumably continue after all of us are gone. This is the topic of friendship and people's peer relationships. Let me turn this here. In Britain recently, there was a study released that had interviewed 36,000 children. They asked the kids in the study, if you could make your lives better, how would you do it? What would make your life better? The most frequent answer was, we'd like to live in a world with fewer conflicts, whether they're conflicts between nations, between groups of people, at home with our parents, siblings. Second most frequent thing that could make their lives better was for them to have more friends. I say here that 36,000 children can't be wrong. There's a belief that people's interest in having friendships, that participating with others is a very ancient motivation, that it's actually a need for people, something that gives us both pleasure, something that provides us with experiences that are important for our adjustment, and also is a great source of information and guidance. People are fundamentally information-seeking people. We need information because it reduces the uncertainty in the world in which we function and allows us to function in more efficient ways. The need for social contact or the desire to be among others is something that we've actually inherited from our animal past. If you were to go to a zoo or to a primate center and look at how it is that groups of animals, particularly chimpanzees, other primates, even great apes, they function in groups. They enjoy each other's company. They solve problems together. They enjoy each other's company, sometimes on a one-to-one basis. Animals, like humans, have friends. And it's this sort of heritage that we've inherited and has become part of our daily bread. Once, when we were doing a study, I noticed some students are here from Centennial Regional High School. We were doing a study several years ago at Centennial Regional High School, and we asked the students there some questions about what were the sources of hassle in their life. What's the biggest problem that can happen to you? We expected that they were going to say problems with interacting with my parents, conflict with parents. Instead, they said, my biggest concern is being rejected by my peers. So regardless of whether we were talking about functioning in a group level, the way that a troop of animals might, or with your best friends, friendship, functioning with others is a thing that, particularly for young people, is a very, very real concern. Friendship is about connection. It means establishing a committed relationship to someone, not the same way that perhaps it would exist in terms of marriage or some other sort of partnership of this side. But one of the important features of friendship is having that kind of committed connection where you have some kind of investment in your friend, an investment to include that person in activities, to try to make that person and yourself better people as a result of it. Friendship is one way by which, or peer relations, one way by which we experience or try out the different ways that we might think about ourselves. Been a long tradition of thinking that somehow friendship and peer relationships are uniquely or very strongly related to how we think about ourselves and how we see each other. One part of our experiences with friends is trying to understand whether something about ourselves is me or not me. You know, are my friends going to like me for the person that I think that I happen to be? Once we did a study about 15 years ago in which we had followed up some people that we had known since they were young teenagers, younger than many of the people in this room. We wanted to find out what was the factor from early adolescence that was going to predict well-being in adulthood. We used measures of school performance, factors related to family functioning, also measures of peer relations. the best predictor of who was going to function well in adulthood was whether or not they had the capacity to form strong relationships with their peers when they were younger. So in this respect, I think that friendship is important to us. As I said already, 36,000 children can't be wrong, and that's sort of the orientation I'm going to be taking today. Aristotle, he existed before Facebook, over 2,000 years ago. You have to imagine, though, that if Aristotle was alive today, he would have a Facebook page. He wanted to tell people about his thoughts. He'd no doubt be using some kind of blog to explain his views to people. Aristotle claimed that friendship, as I said already, has a moral purpose. Friendship doesn't always have a moral purpose. It could have other purposes as well. Aristotle said you can have 3 different types of friendships. Some are based on utility. We get something from our friends in the way that we might have a friend that we're in business with. Friendships can also be pleasurable. We can enjoy each other's company, do things together, go and engage in fun activities. Third feature of friendship, which Aristotle believed to be the highest form of friendship, was one that was based on virtue. That when you entered into a friendship, one of the responsibilities of being a friend was trying to make your friend a better person, just as your friend was trying to make you a better person. One thing that's interesting about friendship is that people think that friendships are relationships that are conflict-free, and that's not true. In fact, there are more conflicts between friends than there are between other people. The difference between the way that friends and non-friends deal with conflict is that friends resolve their conflicts in a very different way. Friends are much less likely to use conflict resolution strategies that are going to be built on winner-take-all outcomes, where one person is going to try to achieve some kind of victory. When friends try to resolve conflicts, they, of course, recognize each other's points of view, and not just compromise, but really try to find a solution that each person is going to be as satisfactory as possible. Well, I said that friendship came from our past. That's not something new. A few years ago, a person in Holland, her name is Berna Geralju, decided that she wanted to find out something about friendship as having a direct effect on our nervous system. Dr. Wordsworth mentioned before that this morning's session was about addiction in the nervous system. Just wanted to show here that this is your brain on friendship, I said. These are slides of the human cortex and the upper part of the brain. You can see here the first slide is taken from the side. The other ones are taken as if they were across the front like this. What Berna did was this. She had a group of children. Actually, they were 5th and 6th graders, roughly. And she showed them pictures of 3 different types of people. A picture of some of their friends, a picture of other people they knew but who weren't their friends, or pictures of celebrities. When they were shown these pictures, their heads were inside of a magnetic resonance imaging machine. She wanted to find out what parts of the brain light up or are activated when people are shown a picture of a friend. Now, I'll get to the bottom line of the study. Bottom line of the study was that the areas of the brain that are activated when people are shown a picture of their friends are the same areas of the brain that are activated when people engage in other rewarding things. Taking drugs, for example. So it looks as if there's a fundamental reward effect associated with functioning with our dyadic companions for whom we have the strongest sense of affect. Peer relations don't refer to just one thing. All of us have different kinds of friendship relations. Some people we know really well. We might have daily contact with them. We want them to know about our lives, what we're thinking. We share a lot of perhaps emotional experience with them. And these people are people that we would think of as being, as our friendships, or people who are in dyads. A dyad is something that involves 2 people. I've shown a little diagram here. The person is in the center. People are often embedded inside of friendships. They have a few close friendships. I know that on Facebook, the average number of friends is 120, but most of us know this can't be true. Most people have 3 or 4 friends in their lives who they think of as really their closest sort of companions. We're also, sort of the far outside of the diagram here, is the group. Even though we might have a few friends with whom we spend most of our time, we have a broader set of contacts. Maybe some of these people are individuals that we don't see very often. The kinds of experiences that you have at the group level and the dyad level are often very different. As I said already, dyadic experiences, friendships, or even dyadic experiences that involve enemy, mutual disliking relationships, often involve much stronger forms of emotion and different kinds of day-to-day experiences as well. I've used the expression here, cyberbia. Suburbia, like suburbia, is a place where people can exist. Cyberbia is the kinds of social network sites, any sort of digital media by which we can interact with others, by which we can sort of keep ourselves in the loop, either the loop with people in general or with our particular friends. Now, I've made the point here on the right-hand side of the slide that when people use technically based media, Facebook, MySpace, and so forth, instant messaging, cell phones, texting, and so on, that often they use these techniques very differently as a function of whether they're trying to deal with individuals in the group that they fit into or with people who they think of as their best friends. Been several studies about the digital youth culture, trying to find out how is it that individuals use social networking sites and who do they aim their messages at. It's pretty clear that Facebook, MySpace, and so forth, they're aimed at a broad audience. As I said, people claim to have the average number of friends on a Facebook site is 120. They're obviously not directed just at one's closest confidants. Texting, messaging, things of this sort, those are reserved for closer sorts of relationships, people that we have more regular and more intense kinds of contact with. The point I'm trying to make is that when we think about the interface between social experiences with peers, we have to think about it in terms of existing at different levels of social complexity, whether they're friendships or whether it's in a group level, and that we use different sorts of media in order to maintain our interactions with people in these different levels. Friendship, whether we like it or not, is sort of a management issue. It's a management issue having to do with all kinds of basic human motivations and basic needs. One issue that comes up in peer relations is trying to manage something about what's private and what's public. Intimacy, characteristic of dyadic relationships, implies that this is private. It's only between myself and those with whom I have some closer experience. Yet at the same time, we want to be able to show ourselves off to all sorts of people. One of the challenges of managing peer relationships is trying to keep private what one wants to keep private only to a small number of people, and yet at the same time have interaction with a larger number of people. Another management issue in friendship and other peer relations, how am I going to portray myself to others? What am I going to wear? What am I going to say? What kind of person am I going to try to show to others? The person I think I am, maybe the person I want to be, maybe the person that I think they want me to be, and so forth. This is a challenge, particularly for younger people, teenagers in particular. Although people in their 20s and 30s and so forth, believe me, it's not something that goes away. So in this respect, one has to find a balance, or manage a balance between who you think you are and who you think others might want you to be, or how it is that you can fit in. One of the challenges for people of all ages is how to be an individual, how to fit into a group at the same time. This is another sort of management issue. Just as people want to comply and fit in with others, there's also sometimes a desire to try to resist, to be an individual, maybe even resist in some ways with a small number of people standing apart from the rest of the group. One management issue that comes up with friends and peer groups is how do you manage having different friendships? Supposing you can only do something with one person. How do you make sure that your other friends don't feel slighted? Or how do you make sure that perhaps if you're doing something that you want to keep private, that it's not going to become public? How can you manage information that you only want a small number of people to know about? How can you keep that private without it letting go to a lot of other people? There's demands to having lots of peer context. Technology, social networking sites, and so on, they place different demands on these sort of management tasks. One thing that's happening now among people is how can we use these sites so as to promote the features that we want to have in our relationships and at the same time protect ourselves against things like having too many things become public. Now I'm going to turn things over to Felicia, who's going to tell us a little bit about what matters in friendship and when friendship makes the biggest difference.
Thank you, Bill. So friendship really is not one thing. So as Bill has already alluded to, friendship is like a collection of experiences. And so to return to the classification of friendships that was described earlier, our friendships may or may not include those three elements from those three types, so utility, goodness, and pleasure. And as we may also know from our personal experiences, basically, friendship it's so many things. So on the one hand, it's doing things together, it's being close, companionship, support, the list really goes on. But what is most important in friendship, perhaps? Well, there is research that shows that what predicts well-being, which is a good indicator of perhaps what's most important, is having the belief that the friendship is so strong that it pretty much will survive anything. So that you'll be able to work through and transcend problems, and that no matter what happens, you'll still be friends. And we can think of this as committed stability in some sense. And since we're talking about technology today and how it is that it may influence or change our relationships, one might argue that cell phones in some sense might test or threaten that committed stability. Since with cell phones, on the one hand, we're constantly available, yet at the same time, the notion of commitment changes a little bit since we're also constantly changing plans. It's quite easy to do so with a cell phone. And so finally, when is it that friendship might be the most important? Well, during times of stress or difficulty or under conditions of risk. So there are two instances of risk that we can think of. The first one is when we're at risk for being victimized. So for instance, a child or an adolescent in school who might be teased or bullied by other kids at school. Well, in that situation, having one or more close friends who's there for you, for support, and maybe even to protect and defend you can really make a big difference. And another time when having strong friendships can be really important is when things are not going so great at home, when there are problems in the family. Oh, you have it. Thank you. All right. So if we continue with the question of when does friendship matter the most, there's a French poet who became famous with the following quote: "So chance makes our parents, but choice makes our friends." And another version of that quote that I quite like is that God gives us relatives, thank God we can choose our friends. So during childhood and adolescence, relationships take place in at least two social worlds. So in the family at home and within the peer group at school. And the importance of a particular relationship for a child or adolescent, such as having a friend, varies according to experiences in other relationship domains. So what this means is that having positive relationship experiences in one domain can come and compensate for negative experiences in another domain. And research has shown specifically that experiences of friendship, especially best friendship, can protect children and adolescents from stresses in their lives. And one particular situation is, for instance, if there are poor or low quality relationships with parents, well, this is really a time when friendship can come and protect or buffer from the negative effects that might go along with that experience. So the take-home message here really is that strong friendships may really become the most important relationships that you have in your life, especially during times of stress and change. Back over to Bill.
Thank you. Felicia was too modest to say that she's done a lot of these interesting studies about when it is that friendship is most important. Well, I thought that we would finish off our part of the presentation by asking the question about, so how is it that friendships, really sort of, or peer relationships in general, interface with modern social networking sites? One of the questions that Dr. Graham raised at the beginning is this question: are they good or bad? Are they positive opportunities, or do they simply provide opportunities for risk? I think that what we can think of is that Facebook and so forth, they didn't create new needs. And what they did is they simply provided new channels by which people can try to deal with the needs or desires that they have. It's a new way, as I said, we say here in the slide, a new way of doing the old. Now, I think that sometimes new opportunities and new channels provide strength for particular people. You can imagine that someone who might be kind of anxious or shy in the presence of others, that for them, the opportunity to manage the way they present themselves to others via the comfort of a bit of a distance from others may not be such a bad thing. Yet at the same time, as I pointed out before, insofar as insofar as many of the needs and regulations that we have in our social interactions come out of an animal heritage in which there was a lot of face-to-face interaction. Maybe the opportunities that are provided by opportunities such as, by phenomenon such as social network sites, means that some of the regulatory processes that existed before in terms of how we can understand whether someone's joking or not, how we can understand whether we've hurt someone more than what we had intended to, how we can try to repair a problem, some of these opportunities aren't available there. So I think that right now we're sort of in a moment where people are trying to understand how can we move these technologies into our relationships and use them in the most productive way possible. The facelessness, that the anonymity provided by the facelessness of technologically based communication may have some strengths as well as some challenges. I think it may provide some more risks for opportunities for exclusion, we know this already, but also some opportunities for some unfulfilled anticipation. Now, I'll finish my comments with just one thing. Maybe Facebook should be a bit more honest, and instead of saying Facebook friends, instead use something such as Facebook buddies. Now, Bart is going to, whoop, I'm sorry, okay, okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think it's really helpful to have Bill and Felicia have set up some vocabulary and kind of the groundwork of friendship. And before we move into the groundwork of social networking and gaming, we just wanted to get an idea of who's in the room. And we just wanted to start, and there's no repercussions for answering this question, but it's a voluntary question, but raise your hand if you sent a text message since you've entered the room. It's in this part of the room, which is actually a representation of a lot of schools who are visiting with us today.
Well, I'm also interested in getting a tally to see how relevant this information actually is to you guys. So how many people use Facebook, are Facebook users? Whew. All right, you guys better all be friends by the end of this. How many people use MySpace? All right. Okay. How many people use like more than one? Like Twitter and, okay. And I mean, Bill was also talking about management, and how many people on Facebook use those privacy settings so you can kind of distance some people and keep other people closer? Okay, especially with moms and dads, I know. All right.
This is really helpful because of your active use, it's obvious that we're going to have a very active discussion afterwards. I'm hoping that as you're listening to the presentations, you're thinking about questions, you're thinking about maybe things that you disagree with or things that made you think about something. Research is interactive. Your participation, particularly in this realm, is essential. So we are looking forward to this. And before we move, we want to try one more thing, okay? We want to try some live social networking. So if you would just turn to the person behind you and introduce yourself.
All right, and why don't we try a little?
It's fun. It's interesting.
All right, and why don't we try a little Facebook? No, people are having fun.
It kind of wakes up the room. Suddenly, there's a lot happening.
So why don't we try some of the Facebook lingo? Turn to the person in front of you and poke them. All right.